American philosopher Ralph Waldo Emerson once wrote, "Life is a journey, not a destination." If life is a journey, where are you in the journey of your life? More specifically, as you sit here this morning, what emotions does your journey evoke? What words best describe what you're feeling? And where is Jesus in your journey? And this morning, my past has brought me to a place of tremendous gratitude, abundant blessings, incredible optimism. And I am so grateful. Colleen and I both are so grateful that our journey has led us here with all of you, excited to do the work that we're called to do. At the same time, to be honest, I'm exhausted. It's been a weekend, and I'm a little more than anxious about what exactly I've gotten myself into and what might lie ahead. If anyone had told me 15 years ago I'd be standing here ordained a deacon giving a homily, I would have said you are absolutely nuts. But here I stand, and if anyone had told me 15 years ago I'd be an administrator at an all-boys Catholic high school, I would have said, that's crazy. But that's what I do. My life, our life, up to this point has been quite the journey. And Colleen and I also know that this is only one moment in time along our journey, and it hasn't always been such a pleasant road for us. To use some analogies, we've spent some time in the desert, so to speak, feeling empty, hungry, lost, even a little hopeless. We've encountered some rough storms over our 29-year marriage. We've been left shaken and confused. We've climbed to the top of some beautiful mountains and taken in all the beauty of God's creation. And we've also plummeted the depths of the ocean and prayed for light in the midst of darkness. Life for us, indeed, has been a journey full of all kinds of conflicting emotions. For the past 5 weeks here at Mass, we've been on a journey with Jesus, his disciples, and thousands of poor people who were following him around the Sea of Galilee. And I'd like today to spend a few minutes figuring out what exactly we can learn from the way Jesus encountered the people he passed along his journey. If you recall, it began with Jesus crossing from the east side to the west side of the Sea of Galilee and being followed by well over 5,000 people, 5,000 poor people who were tired, hungry, thirsty. And when Jesus saw all those people, what did he do? He said, "Have the people recline." And then he performed a miracle. He took 2 fishes and 5 barley loaves and turned it into a feast where everyone was fed. All these poor people, so tired, so hungry, and Jesus' response, rest, eat. He didn't determine who was worthy of being fed and who wasn't. He didn't berate them for not planning better so that they could have provided their own food for the journey. He fed everyone. No one was left hungry. What a lesson. Then the disciples got back into their boat and they started traveling north up the sea. But Jesus stayed behind. And when it got dark, a storm approached their boat and the winds grew. And the winds became strong and they were frightened. And they saw a shadowy figure crossing the sea. And they were more frightened. And Jesus' response, "It is I. Do not be afraid." He met the disciples in their darkness, in the middle of their storm, seemingly all alone. I'm here. Don't be afraid. He didn't make fun of them. He didn't call them cowards or weak. He just said, I'm with you. Next, Jesus and his disciples arrived at Capernaum, and Jesus taught that difficult teaching about the Eucharist. Unless you eat my flesh and drink my blood, you will not have eternal life. And it was too much for the crowd to hear. They just weren't ready. They couldn't come to terms with the idea that Jesus was offering them his very flesh, his very blood. The idea of eating and drinking Jesus' very being was counter to everything they had ever been taught. It didn't make sense. It was confusing, even offensive. And that's where today's gospel picks up. With all these people overwhelmed by the idea of the Eucharist, this saying is hard. Who can accept it? We don't understand. And many stopped following Jesus. Jesus' response, he didn't condemn them. He didn't call them stupid. He just turned to the remaining 12 and said, do you also want to leave? He didn't demand they profess to understand everything, and he didn't demand they tell him they liked what he was teaching. He never announced judgment against those who weren't ready to hear it. He just made it clear that we all have the free will either to accept or reject the food Jesus offers. As I said earlier, there's so much to learn from Jesus' interactions with people along their journeys. A lot about what Jesus offers all of us, and a lot about what we are called to offer each other as our journeys cross. The offer to the weary, rest. The offer to the hungry, food. The offer to the frightened, comfort. The offer to the lonely, presence. No judgment, no ridicule, no insult, just a safe, loving embrace. That's what Jesus offers us, and that's what we are called to offer each other. And it brings us back to the opening question: how does your life's journey have you feeling this morning? Perhaps you're in a smooth and peaceful place right now in life. And if that's the case, take in all the beauty and joy and peace that you can. Perhaps, though, the journey at this moment in time is not so pleasant where you're at. Life, like many of Jesus' teachings, can be hard. So many of us are in a cycle of grief, grieving the loss of someone we love, or grieving the loss of a relationship that we thought would not ever end. The school starts back up. I'm mindful of so many people navigating the world as a single parent. Too much on their plates and not enough support at their back. Young people struggling to juggle between two homes and navigate two families or a new school. Maybe your journey has led you or a loved one to an addiction that just makes life unmanageable. And so very many today, so sadly, feel hurt, angry, or abandoned because they or someone they love has been rejected, marginalized, even dehumanized by their own church. The very church that Pope Francis tells us over and over must be welcoming to everyone. A hospital for the wounded, not a museum for the saints. Life can be hard, life can be beautiful, and it can be both at the same time. But let there be no doubt, regardless of the circumstances and regardless of the path that led you through Epiphany's doors this morning. We are so grateful that you're here in this place with all of us, and most importantly, before this altar. Because what the gospel readings of the past 5 weeks teach us is that there is no weariness that Jesus cannot rejuvenate. There is no hunger that he cannot satisfy. There is no thirst he cannot quench. There is no storm he cannot calm, and there is no darkness he cannot light. So I end with a prayer and a challenge. My prayer is that as we are together today, especially when we approach the altar in a few minutes to receive the Eucharist, our food for the journey through this next week, my prayer is that we all have a loving and personal encounter with a Jesus who loves us unconditionally. And my challenge for myself and for all of us is to be that loving and personal encounter with Jesus to the people around us who so desperately seek the mercy, the grace, and the love that Jesus extends to all of us.